By Business Unity South Africa's President, Sipho Pityana, and he is joining us to discuss the public letter that he put out there challenging the President of the Black Business Council, Sandile Zungu, to come clean on his position regarding corruption that's happened in the country over the past 10 years. And we invite you to also comment on social media using the hashtag the Modise Network. Mr. Sipho Pityana, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Joining us
and to your viewers.
Yeah, well, interesting. I thought you were going to just put the letter out there and run away. And here you are.
No, I think that when you do a public letter, you basically are inviting public debate.
Yes.
And it's important that we should have these debates. It's not a personal attack on Sandile. If he wasn't the president of BBC, I would not have addressed myself to him. I'm addressing myself to him because he put himself out there as the president of BBC at a particular time in the history of our country. And I'm raising issues in my personal capacity. I note that you introduced me as the president of BUSA. In my personal capacity as a black business leader in my own right. And yes. I believe that, like everywhere else, the issues of ethical leadership face us as black business community, and we need to talk about them, and so openly.
Now, specifically, what is it that concerns you about Sandile Zungu as well as the Black Business Council? Because, you know, one would say they could make the argument. In his case, he could make the argument and say, as a business leader, I interact with political leaders from time to time, and I have to lobby them. I have to participate in some of their initiatives. And to suggest that I am complicit in any corruption that you may have seen or may have occurred under the Zuma administration, I'm not responsible for it. So it's unfair to criticize me.
Well, note that I make the point about the role that Black Business Council has played in this country in raising very important issues about marginalization of black business and bringing in black professionals who are also marginalized in the economy as a noble agenda. And that it's an agenda that gets discredited when it's led by people who lack credibility and integrity, because questions arise about their true intentions. And that's the point really about raising that with him. I make the point about his own culpability in some of the activities around state capture, and that the break from Business Unity South Africa, which, by the way, was a response by business to broader business, including black business, by society generally, including government at the time, that we need to work together and have our differences in one environment. The instance of establishment of Business Unity South Africa was not denying the fact that we have race issues, we have small business issues, we have gender issues, like the rest of society. But the united space was one where we could do this. So, but I have no issue with a separate entity, by the way, which sets apart itself to champion that. But I do have issues with people who assume that role, speak on my behalf as black business, and yet are involved in things that are corrupt, in things that are part of the state capture agenda, because it then, by my endorsing that, it makes me complicit to that, and the ravages of that on society and the country are quite evident. And I think it's time for black business to speak out.
Let's be specific here. You know, there are a lot of young professionals, yes, emerging black business people who don't sit at these big tables with the presidents and ministers, who wish they could, yes, but then they trust that people in leadership positions are representing their interests as best as they could. Now, you are making the charges against Sandile Zungu and others. Let's be specific so that there can be an appreciation for you coming out in this fashion. Why are you coming out with these issues, and what are the specific things that you think Sandile Zungu should be answerable for?
Well, I've put one out there, because he, in responding to my first letter, denies ever having had any business relationship with the Guptas and with Duduzane Zuma, and therefore the Zumas. And he made example of a business relationship that they had, and tried to explain himself out of the equation. And yet, in the follow-up letter, I make the point that demonstrates that, in fact, He was in a business relationship with them. They invited him onto it. They paid him money for a transaction related to that. It was a corrupt deal. They stole a mining license that legitimately belonged to another major mining company. Were it not for the fact that that major mining company went to court and challenged that, and the court ruled against them, he would today be in that transaction. It's one thing for him to say that I was involved in this deal, and for him to say that I never was involved in this deal raises bigger questions. What else are you not sharing with us as South Africans who have placed our trust in your leadership to lead black business? And those are the questions that I'm asking. There are other allegations against him, and I'm not going to air them here, but I could if he challenges me to do so.
Well, I'm challenging you on his behalf. I'll tell you why. Because, you know, people will say, where money is involved, this is what happens. There will be a fallout between those who are already successful, who've got it made, and the younger up-and-coming people also want a share of the transformation cake. You know, if it's still there, and one wonders if it still exists and whether transformation still matters or not, because we've gone through the era of acquiring as much as people can. Yeah. At the expense of everybody else. So, is there any other thing that we need to consider?
The issues around this matter are out there in public, and my follow-up letter, by the way, says nothing that is not already out there in public. I said to Sandile that it's one thing for you to explain your involvement. It's quite another to flatly deny it, because I'm going to use your own words to demonstrate that not only are you admitting to have been a business associate of the Guptas, but you actually give details in one of the interviews about what happened. And you were aware that there was something unsavory about the transaction. And when asked about it, you run away from giving straight answers. That suggests somewhat very shadowy conduct. So I the purpose of my correspondence really is more than just to Sandile. It is to black business. It is to say, is it right that when the nation is saying that these Guptas have caused so much ravage in our society, that we should choose somebody when we know, based on public information, that he was party to all of this? And he didn't land there by mistake, by the way. Sandile, by using his own words, was very much part of at the center of the Zuma agenda from the onset. And I asked him, why did they choose you, and why did they think that you are the most appropriate person to do this? The reason why all of these things are important, Tim, is that you see now we're having a big debate about ANC lists. Rightly so. Because if there's a new agenda of renewal, and I think President Ramaphosa has done an incredible job of saying to the country that we must root out corruption, we must defeat state capture, we must afford opportunities for people who've been involved to come clean and state what it is that they have done, and they must take the consequences that go with that. Business can't be excluded from that conversation. We have to face our own sins, we've got to face our own skeletons, and we have to account. And that's what I'm saying we should do. Where I'm the president of a business organization, which is Business Unity South Africa, we've adopted an anti-corruption pledge, and we're encouraging members to come clean and go to the commission to give account where we know of transgressions. Members belonging to our organization are actually taking action in some instances.
You also mentioned Mzwanele Manyi in your initial letter. Is the challenge also taken to him, or you were just mentioning him?
I mentioned Jimmy because, by the way, I call him Jimmy because I refuse to call him Zwanele.
Yeah.
He discovers his African name when he is in a safe space. He's a real Bantu. When he was in corporate South Africa, he was Jimmy. And when he was in a safe space, he suddenly discovers that he's African. After all, he does have an African name. He is Jimmy Manyi to me until he goes to his grave. The point is this, that I mentioned Jimmy because they are birds of a feather. They were together in this project, and they pretended that the agenda was about advancement of black business agenda. It never was. It was about advancement and part of the pursuit of the Zuma agenda, state capture and corruption. That's my thesis. And I think that Sandile says this in this my second letter. I make reference to his own words about his relationship with President Zuma. And I ask him a question, is that why you want to come back as the president of Black Business Council?
Here's the retort from Sandile and others who are saying, well, you know, Sipho Pityana is the last to speak on this matter because he himself must account for being captured by white monopoly capital, to the extent the suggestion is that you might even be representing those interests, that you are actually the blackface of the voice of white monopoly capital, as the debate goes.
Well, they'll have to state what that means. In my view, I raise a range of issues, sometimes very uncomfortable issues, the issues around ethical conduct. Everybody who interfaces with me in corporate South Africa knows that I raise those, and I do so forcefully. I have no tolerance for corrupt conduct anywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's conducted by black or white person, because you know, Tim, what it is. It is an assault and an insult on the poor and the marginalized in our society. We can't use racial excuses to justify it. When Steinhoff conducts itself the way it does, when KPMG conduct itself the way it was, I've been out there and I've made very public statements chastising KPMG, McKinsey, the rest. So for me, corrupt conduct has no color. I'm as intolerant about it as I am in white business, as in black business. And I'm intolerant about it when it's conducted by my own leaders in society, in politics.
I want to hear your take on the damage, if any, that you think was caused to the cause of economic empowerment as well as affirmative action, you know, because they were relatively new, right? It came towards the end of the 90s, in the early 2000s, and then somewhere things got lost along the way. A lot of smaller businesses that could provide services to government, for instance, lost out on contracts that went to companies such as BUSA. Now it emerges, and lost out to the Gupta. So there should be some collateral damage that probably happened over the past 10 years or so.
Absolutely.
What do you think? Just tell me your view.
Inadvertently, and this is why I want the debate to happen in black business. Inadvertently, most black businesses who are struggling for an opportunity to get in there know that they are marginalized by people who are connected, and they get overlooked even when they have superior products to sell. But they are silenced by the fact that they fear taking on the establishment, a conspiracy between powerful business interests and powerful politicians in government. And they suffer in silence, and unless we open up that debate, we'll never get to the bottom of this. There is no reason why we shouldn't be asking, oh, by the way, why is it only you guys or guys closer to you that land up on the boards of these state-owned entities when we actually have better qualified black professionals who could do a better job? How is it that we landed up with Ehlaudi Mutsoneng, who didn't even have matric as a chief operations officer at SAPC, when there are so many competent black graduates who've qualified in that field as communications, etc., who understand the media industry? Why are they overlooked? Why does Black Business Council not say that every opportunity we have in recommending people to these roles, we want to use it as opportunities to actually show you that we have great ambassadors who can demonstrate the capability and the competency of black leadership? That's our responsibility. Every time we get cronies and pawns who are driving our corrupt agenda, we're actually insulting the vast majority of black professionals out there. That, in my view, is intolerable, it's unacceptable. It will continue unless and until black professionals and black business stands up and say, we will not accept this.
Sipho Pityana, thank you very much for having been my guest.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tim.
All right, well, that's the big issue, the big debate, and we will be picking up the conversation with the Black Business Council President, Sandile Zungu, who will be responding to Mr. Sipho Pityana in a short while. Don't forget to share your views with us, the hashtag, the Modise Network on social media.